Welcome everyone. If you've not been to this channel before, my name is CJ Reynolds. I'm a teacher in West Philadelphia. I teach high school English and hip hop, and I run this channel, Real Rap with the Reynolds, on YouTube. I wanted to do a little intro to give you some context as to what you're watching and how this all came about. A few months ago, I started a new show on my YouTube channel called Teacher Talk Live, which airs every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. It's a show where we talk about different hot topics in education and what it's like to be a teacher. So about a month ago, I reached out to Bridget from the Lettered Classroom and I asked her to be on the show. And instead of being on the show, she thought it would be a good idea if we just did a face-to-face kind of collaboration. And so she and her husband Trent were willing to drive all the way from their home in central Pennsylvania all the way to West Philly and do this collaboration. And what came out of it was this video. I cannot tell you how excited I am for you to check this out. The idea behind the video, we're gonna walk you through that moment where you decided to be a teacher, whether that was you were a little kid in elementary school or you changed your major in college, or you were later in life, 40 or 50 years old, and you wanted to make a change and now you're getting ready to go for it. So we're gonna walk you through that inception moment all the way through to how to survive your first year. Everything in between is covered. We had like a 3.5-hour conversation about this. We hung out for way longer than we planned. And I really feel like as you're watching the video, I would implore you to go ahead and leave comments in the section below as thoughts come up, and I'll get back to every single comment, every single question that anyone leaves for me. If you like what I'm doing here, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button. I would appreciate it more than I could say. So here it is, part 1 of my collaboration with the Lettered Classroom.
Here we go.
It's making this part. Welcome everyone. My name is CJ Reynolds. I have a YouTube channel called Real Rap with the Reynolds. This is my friend Bridget, who comes from the Lettered Classroom. We got together today to talk with you about, today's topic is, so you want to be a teacher. We get a lot of comments, the both of us, DMs, messages, emails, about what it takes to become a teacher and what's that process look like in real time. And so we thought we would break some of those ideas down for you and talk to you about what it takes to be a teacher.
I guess, CJ, here's what I want to know. Did you always want to be a teacher?
Nope.
What did you want to do first?
I didn't even like school. So it's really funny that I ended up here. It's like heading a rock band when I had no interest in music when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be a construction worker when I was very little, and I just liked working with my hands.
You sound like my 3-year-old.
And yeah, it was just, that's something about like the smell of sawdust and working with tools and being outside. I really loved it. And so I went to a trade school and I learned that craft. And when I got out, I just realized that that's not what I wanted to do. Somewhere towards the end of high school, I really got into music and I wanted to be a musician. And I did that for a while, but then that seemed like it wasn't something that I really wanted to do full time. It's a hard life, and I wasn't. I knew what I wanted the rest of my life to look like, and that didn't fit in. So then I thought I was going to be a monk or a priest for a while, and my wife ruined that idea because you can't be a priest and be married to somebody. So then I thought I was going to be a clown for a minute, and someone suggested teaching.
Because you could be a clown and all of the other things maybe at the same time.
It's like all wrapped up into one, right? So it's like really caring about people. You're kind of on stage every day, like performing. And if that wasn't enough, then, start your own YouTube channel.
Yeah, for real.
It's the same thing. And then it was kind of all of that stuff that I always wanted to be all wrapped up into one. Yeah. And now I literally cannot imagine another job. Like if I didn't have this job, I really don't know what I would do. So, yeah.
So when did you first start teaching?
When did I?
Yeah, like how old were you?
I was 27 when I started teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, so I waited, and I think one of the comments I do get from YouTube a lot is like from folks who are 40 or 45 and they're thinking about like kind of reinventing themselves or starting a new career path. And I think that's awesome because I just think you have so much to bring now. Like you've been through life, you've done stuff, and now you have like all of this life experience to bring with you into the classroom. And I think that's really invaluable a lot of times.
So I know that there's so many people out there that are always saying, I mean, do I really want to be a teacher? I'm really, I don't know about the wages. I don't know if that's something for me. I know, a lot of people take their work home afterwards. There's always like all of those questions that go through your head. Because making that decision to go to school and spending 5 years of your life to be able to get this degree that you can only use it for that one specific area is huge, you know? So
Yes.
people like battle themselves trying to figure out if this is what they want to do for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I think there was it's like dropout rates, you know, you hear about those teachers that start and then like 4 years in, they're done, they quit, they're over it, they're burnt out, they're finished. So, you know, I think the thing that we want to like communicate to like all of you out there that are right now, either you're in high school, or I know that there are some that are probably like in middle school or elementary school and they watch our videos and they're like, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. That's great. That's wonderful that you are so passionate. And I feel like a lot of the times those people who start off really, really young, they do grow up to be teachers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there are so many people out there later on that do things like you did and do things like I did, where I made like a different career path in the beginning, and then just teaching falls in your lap and you're like, I'm just gonna try it, I have nothing else better to do with myself. So that's like that's a big thing. So I guess like the question is what do we want to say? Like, how did you know teaching was where you wanted to be?
So that's really funny because I didn't want to teach. Like I didn't, and I've talked to my audience about this before, where I didn't read a book of my own volition until I was 18 years old. I just never was interested in it growing up. And I grew up in a family where no one on my mother's side, that was my family that I mostly connected with. None of the men had ever graduated from high school. It wasn't expected of me to like read a lot or to put in extra hours at school. And so to go through that and get out the other side, and I wanted to go to college, and my family was like, why would you ever go to college? Like, just join the union with everyone else, because that was a pretty safe bet. And the idea of like going to college and then what? Like, what was I even going to do?
Yeah.
Because I graduated with a degree in English, which there really was like, now what? What do I do with this? So I didn't really enjoy high school so much. I enjoyed my friends, but I didn't enjoy the learning process. And I never had one of those teachers that I really connected with. But when I started teaching and I saw students that were me like 15 years ago, it just something dawned on me like, man, I can really kind of like help this child navigate their life a little bit more. And that was one of the things that really, really drew me in. And the more I went down that rabbit hole, the more I just realized, like, I can never leave this. This is the best.
Yeah. So I guess, like, let's try to give them some advice. Like,
sure.
So what are some things that they could maybe do or try out in order to help them decide whether or not they're going to be teachers?
Yeah. I think that's great.
Right?
Like, that idea of, like, almost like try it before you buy it sort of situation, right? So
like your worst experience ever would be like go to the YMCA and volunteer at the YMCA, because those are the kids that are like crazy, and if you enjoy that, you're gonna love teaching.
Exactly.
Because the kids are so much more calm.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point is this idea of don't put yourself in the ideal space. Don't go to like just the teachers who are the greatest classroom to check it out. Go where the madness is, because that's going to really let you know, like, it could be like this my first year. It could be complete madness all the time. And I think that would give you a better sense of what you wanted or didn't want. Because a lot of times I think teachers start teaching and they remember what it's their memory of what high school was like or elementary school, and then they realize like, oh, the kids aren't the same anymore. This school's not the same, or I thought it was going to be like this. So my advice would be to get into as many classrooms as you can.
Yeah.
Just start calling schools and saying, hey, I want to be a teacher. I'd really be interested in coming in and sitting on your class. Would you mind if I did that? And I really don't know teachers that would say no to that.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I know that in my previous school, we actually had a after schools program, like an after school program for kids to be able to go and like hang out until their parents pick them up at about 6. So it's like a daycare essentially. But it was a bunch of high school students. So like in my head, I was always thinking like as I was walking past them, but I never like actually sat down and talked to any of them. I was thinking like, do you guys want to be teachers when you grow up? Like, is this why you're like volunteering to come and like work at this place where you're having to take care of the kids when we know like at 3-4 o'clock they are at their wildest moments? So
let me turn some of those questions onto you. Did you always want to be a teacher?
I did not. Actually, when I first started going into school, I was this exact same way as you, actually, which was really funny because as I'm listening to your story, I'm like, yep, that was me too.
Really? What parts?
Yeah. So I hated high school. I skipped school all the time. I hung out in this little like bush area that was in between our school and in between like the house neighborhood area. There was like this gate, and you could just hang out in between this little gate, and, like in the middle of the bushes. It was really neat. So I would just kind of hang out there, and I would skip class a lot. I got into a lot of trouble, got into a lot of fights when I was younger. And I mean, I literally think they gave me my degree just so that they could push me out and say, just leave, please just go away. And then I went and started a community college, and I never went to class. I had 3-4 classes, and I never went to any of them. I never dropped out of them, so I took zeros for all of these classes, and my parents never found out. So Mom, I'm so sorry. So after that, I like got jobs and stuff because I was very rebellious and I just wanted to be out with everyone else. And I got I started working at a New York and Company in the mall, and then from there I started working at Red Lobster as a waitress, and I just never went back to school. And I became a manager like pretty quick. I think I was like 19 years old and I became a manager for Red Lobster, and I was like, this is so much fun. But it was a very rough life. And the more that I kept doing it and the longer I kept doing it, I was like, I don't want to grow up, and have kids and have a family and have this life where I'm at work until 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Because I'm closing shift manager, that type of thing. So, and then my parents all worked in fast food, and it was just, that's not what I envisioned for myself, because they work. Yeah. They've always worked. So I went back to school and I tried to do some classes, but first I wanted to be a psychologist. I liked the brain. Thought people were interesting. I like to sit back and people watch. I'm that person. And then I wanted to be a psychiatrist, because then I really wanted to deal with crazies. I loved it.
Yeah.
And then I went and took a really big drastic turn, and I went for business. And then I did another turn and I went for interior design. And then finally, I moved to Alabama. This was all in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I moved to Alabama, and I was waitressing at a restaurant there, and wasn't going to school at that time, that kind of deal, because I just moved. But I ended up having my older son. So that was kind of my, hello, wake up, you've got to stop doing this. Like, you have got to get your life together. This is not okay. You're about to have a kid. That's huge. And I was 21. So I was talking to my cousin, Mr. G, on the phone, and I was like, you've got it. And he's just like been my big inspiration, like person. I just love him to death. Like, we were very, very close. So I'm just going to do it. He's going to school to be a teacher. Why can't I do it? Like, I could do it.
Yeah.
I got it. And so I just did it, and it just stuck. And I'm like, I could do this. And I'm one of those people that, like, once I want to do something, like, I'm going to try my very hardest to do my very, very best. I don't want to fail at something. I want to be the best of the best of the best. So that's kind of where it all happened. I was 26 when I graduated and got my first job.
Dude, I love it.
So I know, really, like, identical, right?
So here's what is really standing out that I think is, like, important to, like, impress upon folks. One, that for me, watching your videos on YouTube, I get a very, sometimes you create your own narrative about someone's life, right? So it's like, you were obviously the little girl that played school when you were a kid, and then you wanted to be a teacher, and now you're kind of like living out that dream. I don't know where that idea comes from. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But that was just, like, you seem like you love it so much, and you put so much time and energy into it. So of course this had to be like a lifelong dream, right?
Yeah.
So it's so funny, and I love, like, so I went to community college, and I just went. I just took classes I thought were interesting, yoga, art history, stuff that I had no idea like, what it was going to do with.
Just, like,
right?
winging it.
Yeah, and I think there's such a negative stigma about community college, and so when my students graduate, if they're going to community college, they don't tell everyone else where they're going, because they feel embarrassed by it. And I went, and then I graduated from a state school, but I think the really interesting thing is now I teach across the hall from Harvard University and St. Joe's and UPenn, and it becomes like a mixture. It becomes a non-issue once you're in the classroom.
No.
And it's your performance is what's going to drive whether or not you do well. and not necessarily what school that you went to.
No principal's gonna come in and be like, so you went to a community college first, let me sit down and look at you, and they're not gonna judge you based off of that. Like, you know, and I think I had one of those conversations with my sister because she wanted to be a doctor at one point. She was like, well, I have to go from the very beginning into the best of the best of the best. And I said, no one's going to care where you started, where you got your basics. No one's going to care. You can do the very basics here, be cheap about it, save your money, because I promise you what you're going to get there is exactly what you're going to get over there. You're going to learn algebra. Like, it is what it is. Like, you don't have to do all of that. Just get your basics done, go cheap, start here, and then find out where you want to go that works for your degree, and then finish off your last 2 years there. Like, because in the end, they don't know that I went to Jeff State Community College. They see that I graduated from the University of Montevallo with honors. Like, that's all they see. They don't know about the zeros that I took. So, like, they have no idea.
No, and I think, I just feel like that's so important, especially for even for parents who are watching that, are thinking like, my child doesn't do anything in high school. Like,
I did nothing.
I just think no one could have anticipated like the person that I would have become, and how much I like this now, like, and how much time and energy that I put into it. So it's really funny. It's funny that when you find that thing that you connect with like that, how you can just go all in. And and so I think that kind of leads into our next topic also, which is schools. So a big concern that I get from a lot of viewers is this idea of how much money you're going to make when you teach, right? Like, you don't make a lot of money, or will I make enough money to live? Can I support my family on this? What about my student loans, and how do they play into that? So I like this topic a lot because it has directly affected my life. I mean, can we talk about, like, do you make what you feel like you're worth, or enough money, or, you know, how does that play into your
and
life?
I try to think of it this way too. Like, I also try to remember that I have 3 months off and I have holidays off and I have breaks in between. So when you really start to divide out all of that, I mean, I feel like we make a pretty good amount for for the time that we're spending throughout the entire year. You know, in normal jobs, you know, I wouldn't get any days off. Like, it just, that's how it was. You know, I would have my 1-2 days a week, whereas, you know, we have weekends, yes, but we also have those holidays that we had off. If I was in the restaurant and in the retail business like I was in before I decided to become a teacher, I wouldn't have those off. I would never have a holiday off. Like, I would always be working holidays because it's the busiest time of the year for us. And so there's a lot of things to, like, consider there. And I honestly don't think about it as the money piece of it for me. For me, it was because it's something that I want to do. It makes me happy. I enjoy it, and I don't go home miserable. I have my good and my bad days. I mean, everyone does, but I don't go home miserable saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't make enough money. These people don't pay me enough to do this. Never once has that ever crossed my mind. And y'all, let me tell you, I started working in Alabama, and in Alabama, guess how much I started getting paid at?
I'm wondering if it's lower than what I started getting paid at. So go ahead. What's your...
In Alabama, I was getting paid $30,000 my first year.
$32,000 a year was my first. And I was totally fine with that. I remember they passed that contract.
I was so excited.
And I was like, dude, I'm going to make almost $1,000 on my paycheck. This is going to be amazing.
I was so excited. I was like, this is so cool. Except when I saw how much the government was taking out. I was like, what?
Yeah. and so I think that's a really good point. And I'd also... When I first started teaching, I had really good health benefits, and those have changed over the years. But I think when we had our son, it cost like $5, right? Like, that was the bill that I got from the hospital. I was like, this is the cheapest
awesome.
kid anyone ever had.
I
feel like I had a coupon. and like, you know, you have to go into it not just looking at the money. I started in Camden, New Jersey, and I knew what kind of school I wanted to teach at. I knew what I was looking for. I knew the kind of kids I wanted to connect with. And so the money was kind of a non-issue. But one of those, I think that time off is so important, especially when you have kids. It means I don't have to find daycare for my children. If I have off for winter break, my kids have off with me, and I don't have to worry about that.
I can't even imagine, like, during snow days. In my head, I'm like, how do these parents do it? How do these parents who have jobs who don't have snow days how do they find care for their kids and then go to work? I mean, I could not even imagine it.
It would be a constant point of anxiety. Whereas
Yes.
for snow days now, I'm so pumped. I'm like, oh man, all we gotta do is run the red box and we're set like for the day. But if I didn't have that, I don't know what I would do. And you know, if we're thinking about summers off, I legitimately, even as much time as I put in, I go to school early every day, I stay late, and then I do YouTube, feels like almost a full-time job a lot of times. But I still feel like there's time in there in the summer to, if I'm hustling, if I need to make more money, I can do it.
Oh yeah.
But it's about figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
The tricky part, I will say, is something we went back to earlier, is when you get a teaching degree, there's not a lot of side hustles that you can use that for. So you do have to be creative in your thinking and thinking about, like, what else can I do? Can I do TPT? Can I do, can I somehow monetize something else that I'm doing, or mentor people, or work for a daycare in the summer, or
tutoring.
counsel,
I mean, it's like a big one too.
Oh, you
know?
can make a lot of money tutoring. I mean, people that need that are willing to pay a lot of money for that. And so I think there are ways to add that up, and you should not let pay be the thing that decides what you're going to
you know, and the state is a big thing to consider too. We had a student teacher this previous year who was looking at all of these different states. Like, she didn't want to stay in the same state, and I think that was like a benefit for her. For me, I was kind of locked down because I already had a kid, and I didn't want to move far away from my mother because she was my help at that time.
Sure.
So like, I was kind of locked in. I didn't really have a choice of going to other states. But that's another thing. Like, if you're young and you want to venture out and explore different places, you're going to find a huge difference in pay on different states. So I know that I did like a question and answer for teach.com. But like, if you go to like teach.com, you can find out what the pay rates and what are the requirements for each of the states, like anywhere in the United States, to be able to say, you know, how much your teacher is getting on an average, getting paid here and there and there. And that's a huge thing to consider too. You know, do you have that flexibility to be able to say, I'm not going to stay here, I'm going to go to a different state that may offer me more money?
Yeah. And what's the cost of living in the place that you're going to? So if we look at Alaska and New York are the two states that pay the teachers the most in general, like on average. But the cost of living is much, much higher there. Whereas I forget what the second one was. Oklahoma is one of the least paid states for teachers, but the cost of living is much lower there. And I'm not trying to say, like, I wouldn't try and speak to you all and say teachers can make less money in Oklahoma and kind of get away with it. I have no idea. I don't live in Oklahoma. I drove through one time. It was lovely, but
it is very nice.
Yes,
I lived right next to it for a while.
But in Pennsylvania, I do feel like I do make enough. See, now the principal might see this and the board, and they're gonna be like, we don't have to give Reynolds a raise next year. He said it. It's on YouTube. He makes enough money. You know what?
All of my principals and administration in my district see this. Like,
and when you find out that people are watching, you're like, well, wait a minute. What are you doing? Or, you know, I can't be selective in who's consuming this content.
Yeah.
And so, you really just have to embrace it and go with it and be like, I am. This is what I'm going to do this summer.
It's good. But I think, like, the big thing to know, and I know money is important. I'm not trying to, like, I don't think either one of us are going to say that money isn't important, because money is what keeps, you know, our kids, you know, it feeds our kids, it gives them shelter, you know, it gives us a life that we would like to live, you know. But at the same time, you know, I don't think either one of us went into it for money.
Nope.
And I just never even considered it. I never went online and said, I need to figure out how much teachers make before I make this decision to go to school to become a teacher. That was never the thing that I focused on. I became a teacher because I wanted to focus on something that I did that made me happy. And, you know, and you make things work, you know, like right now we just bought a house. Like, we're going to cut back on a lot of things. We're just going to have to make things work, because that's just what life is. You know, you cut things. Y'all, we're Dave Ramsey people. So, like, we are like, no, we're not buying this anymore.
Yeah.
No, we're all eating ramen noodles tonight. I'm kidding. We don't do that. I mean, not always. But, you know, like, so I don't know. So I wouldn't always consider it as just that, but just know that, you know, other states have different options, and, you know, there's always other things that you can do. I mean, there are people, like, during the holidays, go get a part-time job at the, you know, at your local what is it called? Just a retail place. And I know a lady who wrapped presents there. Like at my school, she wrapped presents. Another one during the summer is babysitting. Like she's being a nanny all summer. So she's hanging out with some kids, just chilling out at the pool every single day because she has the flexibility to do that. So you can always be creative, but.
And I think an important note there too is like, for me anyway, that sense of like going to something every day that I'm excited about, that I feel fulfilled by, coming home from that, which sometimes you come home and, you know, my hair was all brown when I started teaching. It wasn't this color. And
I have like 6 gray hairs.
Yeah. I have like 6 brown ones left. So, you know, it's kind of the same. It's funny to me though, when I have so many friends that don't like what they do. Yeah. But they make enough money.
Oh, yeah.
And so to do something and really deeply feel fulfilled every day and like I'm contributing to the world and I'm doing something worthwhile is really a big deal. But I do want to say real quick that when I did start teaching in Camden, I did get to a point where that amount of money wasn't enough anymore. Yeah. And so I stayed at that school for 5 years. And I always want to be the teacher that kids are going to come back in 10 or 20 years and there's old Mr. Reynolds still sitting there, still doing his thing. Yeah. And I long for that. So to make that decision to leave that school was really difficult. But moving to Pennsylvania, I felt like I got to serve the same community, teach the kind of kids that I wanted to teach and in the kind of school that I wanted to be in. And I did get a pay increase from that. But that was really, I mean, if I made enough money, I'd still be teaching in Camden, New Jersey. Yeah. But you do get to a point sometimes where that isn't an option anymore. And, you know, for me, it was like 2 kids and we bought a house. I can't make $32,000 anymore. I could work full time at Home Depot and make more money than this. You know, so
I totally understand you there because that was kind of one of the reasons why we moved to Pennsylvania too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and then on top of that, people have a tendency to ask me a lot, like, do you spend your own money in your classroom? Do you go out and buy all of this stuff? Do they give you money? I know that's like the other big question.
Well, especially because you have a great classroom too. Thanks. So I'm actually interested in this answer as well. So do you spend a lot of your own money?
I do. I do. And I have to kind of cut myself back and give myself a budget this year, especially with us buying a house. But I mean, I do. I put a lot of my own money into my classroom because I want it to be a place that I enjoy. I want it to be a place that I go back. It's like my home away from home. I spend more time there than I spend
100%
at my house.
100%, yeah.
So I wanted it to be that when I walked in, I didn't want to feel like I was walking into a classroom. I wanted to feel like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing. Like the very first time that I opened up my classroom.
I'm giving you a high five because I'm so pumped about that answer.
The very first time I opened up my classroom to my students, my first year teaching, you know, because we had like a day where the kids could come in and kind of, you know, just check out the room and meet the teacher, that kind of stuff. One of my kids, who I actually will have for the rest of the time there, because she's now in my MAC team, but she just looks around, she goes, this teacher understands me. And I'm like,
no,
yeah,
that's the best answer.
Yeah. She was
like, I'm done now.
Well, I mean, she really said, holy crap, this teacher understands me. And I'm like, yeah, that's we were going to work on saying that word. But yes, I do understand you.
That's awesome.
But you know, I want those kids to have that feeling. I want them to feel like they're walking into this really cool place and they're like, this is my classroom, instead of just walking in and saying, great, here I am, spending another, 7 hours, 8 hours a day in here.
Yeah.
I want it to be an experience for them. So I will do that. And I told my husband from the very beginning, I will spend money in my classroom. I'm so sorry. Like, you're just going to have to live and let live. So, and he's very supportive of it. But I've gotten very crafty and creative. Like, we go to garage sales.
That's the key, right?
We look on Facebook Marketplace, which is our new favorite thing this year. And Craigslist, like all of those places. And sometimes just begging and saying, hey, I'm a teacher, I don't make that much money. Can you please help us out?
If you put it out there, you would really be surprised at who's willing to give stuff to teachers because they need it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why places like Donors Choose really, really work for people, because they're willing to just put that out into the world and see what comes back.
Exactly. Like, we were pretty much going around to places saying, hey, we're really trying to do this theme. Would you be willing to give us a few things to be able to put up there? And so it works. Some people are like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Here, have some of this. So,
which is funny too, because if I would never if I really needed something, ask someone for something for free. It goes completely against my nature. But if it's for my students, I'll ask anyone, anytime for anything.
Exactly.
And that it's a game changer because you're asking for someone else. To that point of being creative, teaching high school, there's just, all of the learning stores and the school stores, there's nothing. There's nothing in there for you. And my first year, that's kind of where I pulled from, and that's where I thought, oh yeah, this is where you go to buy all of your stuff. And then when I realized it wasn't there, I had to become more creative because I didn't want, I teach in inner city Philadelphia. I didn't want like the apples with arms and legs or like the pencils that run because it just...
They're going to walk in here and say, why do you got this up here?
Because it just looks like it's for kids.
You're trying too hard.
Yeah. And it doesn't portray who I think I am. I want my classroom to be sort of a reflection of the type of individual that I am, or the kind of class we're going to have this year, or how far I'm willing to go to make things comfortable for students. And so I had to start kind of making my own stuff, and I don't think that has to be hard either. You can find tons of stuff on things like Pinterest, or I found that even like taking the posters that I had in my room and just putting them in frames from IKEA is like makes it look nicer, more professional. You don't have 97 holes from all the years you had to take it up and take it down. Or when my school one year came in and said, hey, we have this small amount of money for each teacher and you can go buy bookshelves. That's the bell. This happened, that happens.
Everybody can go home, bye!
That happens all the time when I'm doing videos in school. So instead of taking the bookshelves that they wanted or going to IKEA and buying something different, I just took the money myself and I made all of my own bookshelves in my room for less money than what they were willing to pay for bookshelves. So then I just used that money to buy like a couple other things for my room. And that's kind of where my room really started to be what I wanted it to be, when I learned to think outside the box and think of how can I make this somewhere that's super inviting for the kids, somewhere that I want to be every day. But also I got away from this idea of like the classroom having to look like a certain way. I wanted to look like what I wanted to look like, and it's only ever benefited me. So I do spend my own money, but I try to be creative in that, or say, hey school, what were you going to spend that money on for me? Can I have that and better figure out like how
and it doesn't hurt to ask. It never hurts to ask, because the only thing they're going to tell you is no. Like that's the worst that they're going to tell you.
And if you don't ask, the answer's already no.
Yeah, so exactly. That's a great point. And I like that you guys can paint your walls.
Well, I also do a lot of...
I had this flexibility to do this.
I do a lot of asking for forgiveness instead of permission.
Yes, I do too!
So it's like, I'm going to paint chalkboard paint, which is so in my room, if you have not seen my room on YouTube, I have chalkboard paint all around my room, and then for all the posters they didn't sell, or the posters I didn't want to spend money on, I just drew on there by projecting the picture up there. I drew over top of the picture because I can't draw anything. It would be all stick figures up there. It looked like a third grader drew all over my wall. But actually, that's not fair, because there's probably many third graders that could draw much better than I could. But but I did it, and then I remember like administration walking in and saying, this looks fantastic, and I was like, I'm so glad you said that, because
I was really nervous.
I thought I was gonna have to take it all down.
That's what I did with my paper. I started off with little dots, which I got approved for, and oh bless if they're watching this, and then I just started with lines, and I'm like, oh, they'll forgive me, I think.
But when your room becomes the best room in the school, or the place that the kids like the most,
they love it.
How can you argue with me?
They can't. They absolutely can't.
If I make this, if this is all about the students, I just feel like you cannot make the argument with me.
And I think what people don't understand too is that you don't have to do that overnight. It has taken me years to be able to collect all of the things that I have. And I don't go out and get things immediately. Like the maps that I'm about to get for my classroom, I'm getting it from a relative of mine that's many states away that she's going to send me some of that, and I'm going to pay for the shipping for it. But like, you know, I'm not going to just go out and just get everything just because I want it to be this certain way and it has to be absolutely perfect. I know that I have to wait for it, and I'm just going to buy little by little by little, and it's going to be okay if I don't have it immediately.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of build it over the years, and over the years I've collected a ton of junk that I just have inside of my closet, and now I just don't want to get rid of it because I'm a hoarder. But I mean, like, and that's the thing too, is that you don't have to immediately go out and get it. You can slowly but surely start to collect things. Use what you got, use what the teacher left you, use what you can find in the hallway that other teachers are trying to get rid of. And then as you're finding deals, and every single month, you know, maybe put like $10 towards your classroom, go to the dollar store and then buy a couple of things there and then use it in your classroom. But it doesn't have to be like, boom, there it is. My first year teaching, I'm going to go and I have to spend, you know, $1,000 to make my room this like Pinterest perfect classroom, because it doesn't have to be that at all.
Yeah. Which is hard.
Yes.
I think it's hard to like realize that this is what it is, but maybe be creative about that too. Like, how can your students help you do that? How can maybe you and the students create a room or a world within your room together in those first years when you don't have all of that stuff? And so I just think there's a lot of creative ideas in spending your own money.
So I know a lot of other people out there who are considering to be teachers think about, you know, well, do teachers really spend, you know, all their entire time, you know, from 6 o'clock in the morning until 6 to 7 o'clock at night there, and then they take stuff home that they're having to work on. They're working these crazy long hours. On top of that, they have to do like all this paperwork from like administration, and they're having to deal with all of the crazy politics that are going on. And is that really something that I want to deal with? So I'm curious to know, what is your take on that?
It's changed a lot over the years.
Yes.
When I didn't have children, I first started teaching. I was 27 years old. I would go in as early as I could get into the school in the morning, and I would stay until about 6 or 6:30 at night. And it was my pleasure to do it. I loved it. I was very busy, but that made me feel better because I would show up early. I was in a quiet building, and you know that
it's the best.
A building with no children in it is like, I don't understand it when we make the transition to madness because it's so peaceful right now. And so to be there, it just helped me set myself up for success for the day. Staying late did the same thing. I would organize everything. My board would be set up for the next day. My copies would be made. I'm not in the copy room making copies like 10 minutes before class starts, which is what I do now. But back then I didn't do that sort of stuff. And it was lovely. I didn't mind. The thing is, it's not do I not want to. So I don't, let me make this transition. I don't take work home anymore, but it's for different reasons. It's because I don't want to. Back then, I really didn't mind. I liked doing it.
You were just excited you had a job. You were like, I got a job. I'm going to do as much as I can.
And I literally want to be the very best that I can be. Now, today, 12 years later, I am not as interested in some of that stuff. Here's the thing. My job has become more and more focused on just the students. I choose not to do a lot of things, even things I'm supposed to do. So when I get 20 emails in a day that I don't feel like are super important for me to get back to, like, it's not it might be pressing for someone who's trying to like input data or document something. I just choose not to do them. Now, if they're important, if it has something to do with like special ed paperwork, or I need to have something in for a student that has a tracker, of course, because that is directly about the students. But I pick and choose what I think is important after that. And a lot of that comes from, I go home and my kids are 7 and 9, almost 10, and they're still pumped when I come home. They are excited when I walk in the door. They love hanging out with me. We lay and play Legos, we play video games, we do stuff together. And I realize that is very, very fleeting, and that one day that's not going to exist anymore. I will tell you now, I am just as thrilled thinking about the day when my kids are older and they have their own lives. I will be in school just as much as I was when I first started teaching. I just know it because I love being there. It's sometimes my wife will call me and say, "Are you coming home soon? Like, I have dinner ready," and I'm like just hanging out with people or talking about the day or mentoring kids or mentoring teachers or listening to how someone's day like completely fell apart or And I just can't get enough of all that stuff. So much so that, again, I started a YouTube channel because I love the interaction with all of the other teachers. So I think if you have a job where you're trying to look at your time and saying, this is how much money I make, this is how much time I'm spending, I think you're going about it wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so funny because the exact way that you described that as far as like time is exactly how I was. In the very beginning, I was there 6 to 6:30, and then I would go home, I would have more stuff, and I would stay up until like 11, 12 o'clock at night, just like laminating and cutting things out because I was so excited I had a job. Like there were so many people out there that were graduated with me, did not have a job, and I'm like, I got a job, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna be a hard worker. So I did as much as I could, and then every year I got better at managing my time and figuring out when am I going to be able to do this. And I got really good at asking parents to do a lot of stuff for me too. And I would always just send a little email and say, hey, I have some lamination. Would you love to do this for me? I can send it home.
Oh.
And they would love it. They eat it up. They're like, yeah.
My own children now, like doing stuff.
Yeah.
If I have to bring stuff home, they're like, oh, Dad, can I help? And I'm like, well,
laminating.
Sure.
My 3-year-old likes to put things through the laminator. He loves it. He thinks it's the best thing ever. So like now I've just gotten better at being able to manage my time. But again, like you said, if you're looking at it as I'm not making enough money or I'm going to be spending too much time there, then this probably isn't the career choice for you. Like it truly needs to be something that you are very passionate about, and it's just like second nature, and it's the thing that you just wants to constantly be doing at all times of the day.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point also that I want to just make sure people are taking away from this. Like this idea of what in the beginning, it's naturally going to take you longer to do it. You don't have the pool of resources that you do when you're a few years in even. That I think something magical happens in that third year where it's like, I've done this 2 years already. I know how I'm going to start my year. My syllabus is already made. My course description is made. I know what activities I'm going to do in the beginning of the year and what supplies that I need to do that. And when you're first starting out, you have no idea. Like and then I feel like that second year is like you trying to improve upon the first year, but there might still be a lot of creation in there. And the further you go, I mean, there are times when I'll completely redo something and it takes me just as much time, but there's so much that's already there that I don't have to worry about anymore.
Yeah, my lesson plans are non-existent now.
Yeah.
Like I have it's chicken scratch. Like it's all in your intro
head too.
This, do this, teach division. That's what that's literally it. Main idea. That's what we're focusing on today. Let's do it. Go.
Because when you first start out cooking, you have to look at the recipe and watch the YouTube videos. And when you're years into it, I don't think anyone that's I don't know.
A professional baker. Like if you're not a cake boss,
wait a minute.
You're not reading your cooking.
Where's my index card? It has, splatters all over it.
Yeah.
You're just in it and you're doing it and it's second nature to you.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I guess we now lead into school. So you finally at this point said yay or nay to teaching based on everything that we've talked about. So now it's school. How do you go about picking the school? What kind of a degree do you go for? Because that was and it still is. I have to go back to school because in Pennsylvania, I have to have a master's. Is that that's a legit thing? At least in my district, I have to go back to school. They don't really give me a choice. After a certain year, I think they cap me at 8, and if I don't go back to school to get more hours,
really,
they won't give me more money.
See, I'm learning from this video also. I should probably look into this so I can continue to have a job.
I have to go back to school, and it's so nerve-wracking. I'm like, what degree am I going to go for? I don't really want to do that. I know it's going to be easy, but do I really want to do that? I don't really want to do it. It's just, all of those things kind of go through your head, and you really don't know exactly what it is that you want to focus on. And this is going to be interesting too, because you, like you said, you had an English degree, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I went in with straight elementary. It was K through 6 was what I went in for. So what are your takes on picking a school?
So being a community college graduate, I think what you're going to learn in a school is what you're going to learn in a school. For me, it's about how much work was I willing to put into it? What was I willing to get out of it that maybe wasn't even being offered? Connections with professors, connections with other teachers, learning how to network with others and and creating like a pool of resources that I still dip back into, that I'll go back to someone that I worked with years ago, where that was part of my student teaching or part of my practicum situation, but I built those relationships. The school didn't set that up for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure, and this is my opinion. I mean, you all might go a completely different way with this, but in my opinion, it doesn't really matter where you go to school. It matters what you're doing with where you are, because like I said before, I mean, I graduated from Rowan University, which is a state school in New Jersey, and I teach across the hall from all these Ivy League schools, and I've also worked closely with Teach for America before, and those kids have all come from really good schools, and I've seen some of them do really, really well, but I don't think it had anything to do with where they went to school, and some kids who have just been completely crushed by the job and couldn't handle it, and I don't think their schooling was a very good tell as to whether or not they were going to be successful.
Yeah. I don't think, when you're picking a school, a lot of people pick schools for different reasons. I picked a school because I wanted to go cheap and quick.
Yeah.
So, I went to my local community college, got as much as I could get done there. Then I transferred to go to the university. And it was not an expensive university at all. It was actually a very, very small university. I still lived at home because I had an older son at that time. So I lived at home with my parents at that point, and I was traveling like 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back. Like I said, I wanted to go cheap and quick. And for me, I know I did a little bit of research, and at one point I was going to go to a different school, and then I was like talking to these people I worked at the bank at that time. So I was talking with people at the bank, and they were like, well, wait a minute. I heard that, this University of Montevallo has a really great education program. So that's when I ended up saying, well, I'm going to look into it and see if there's any truth to it. And I ended up moving and going to that school, decided to go with the University of Montevallo, and it worked out perfect. It was a nice little college, and it was perfect for me and for the purpose that I was going for.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at my sister, on the other hand, she wanted to experience a university life. She wanted to experience moving out, living in a dorm, going to this, doing that.
That's a really good point.
Who she was. Yeah. Me, I am a huge homebody. I will stay at home and be totally okay with it. So I wanted something that I could literally like slip in and slip out. I wasn't the person to go and be able to make these long lasting friendships. I've never been that person. I will stay to myself, sat in the very front and the very edge. Like I didn't like to sit in between people. Like I wanted to be away from people. I'm like, I'm going to sit in the outside of the row, right at the very front, so I can focus on that and not focus on everybody else behind me. Because that's what I wanted to get out of it. And like I learned as much as I could. But let's just face it, none of it got me ready for it. Like I had no idea what I was jumping into until I started teaching. Like I probably learned more from blogs and Instagram and things and Pinterest than what I did from my actual university professors. It's sad to say that. I'm sorry if you guys are watching this.
No, that's huge, because in reality, college for education is a lot about like watching a video on how to swim, learning the tactics of like everyone standing in a room going like this, saying like, when you get into the water, this is how you're going to tread water. And then when that first day of teaching is like someone, like your dad kicked you off the edge of the pool into the water, and you're trying to like, what are you going to do? Like remember what they said in class, or remember what that professor said? It's learning all of this stuff in theory without really getting your hands dirty. And I think that's an important component as well.
Yes. So I think you guys need to consider that whenever you're thinking about what school am I going to do. Well, think about what do you really want to take away from it? What is it that you want to be able to experience? I don't know about your experience. Like I said, I wanted to be quick and sweet and short. Like I didn't want it to be huge.
And part of that was because I was older.
Yeah.
Like
I think that
I wasn't interested in being like the Van Wilder of New Jersey. I didn't want to go back to school as like a 25-year-old and like I'm going to dorm parties and like hanging out at frats.
Yeah.
Like, if you're into that, go for it. I mean, maybe you make some great connections there. But there was almost a sense of embarrassment when I first started teaching because I was older. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like, hey, I had this other career in advertising and now I was teaching. It was like, no, man, I did stuff, but it wasn't anything. No one's going to go, oh, you played in like rock bands for 6 years? Like there was just like a sense of embarrassment about it. And then, so I just wanted to get in and finish as quickly as I could and then get on with it.
Yeah.
The other part of that was I was really, really excited about it. I wanted it to take the shortest amount of time possible so that I could just get into the classroom and start teaching and working with kids. And that was huge for me as well.
Okay, so now at this point, you've figured out what school you're at and where you're going to be going. And then you have to decide on the degree. And this is where I'm going to be interested to hear where you're from. Because for me, I had never been to school. Well, I mean, I had my basics pretty much done.
Yeah.
But I went for elementary education. I went for the most basic degree possible. It was just a K-6 is what they offered. So now that's kind of where I'm curious to know about for you and your degree. And, do you have to have a different degree in order to teach high school? Like, how does that work?
So I went to college and I got my degree in English, and then I wasn't really sure what to do with that. Mm-hmm. So after some figuring out, I decided that I wanted to teach, and I went back for what was called a post-baccalaureate certification. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted to teach high school, and so I'm clear from 6 to 12 depending on like the kind of school that it
right.
is. So like, because different districts have so my son is going into 4th grade next year, and in our district that's considered middle school, right? Which is
yes.
kind of way different than how I grew up. But so I just went for that particular certification program. I got it, and I was able to teach high school right from there.
So you don't have to have like an English degree or a math degree or something else like added on to what it is that you already have?
I think in the traditional route you do.
Okay.
But because I already finished with that degree, I just really had to make up some education classes and then student teach, and then I was clear. But I do think that it's really important to think about what you want to
yes.
do, or if there's some sort of add-on degree, or if you want to have a dual major or something like that. But before we talk about that, how did you figure out what you wanted to go for?
I literally went for the easiest thing possible. Everyone else around me was getting the dual degree. They were getting it with special ed. They were getting it with ESL because they wanted to look more marketable. They wanted it to look good on paper. They said that, oh, well, I have this extra in there and I have this piece in there. I chose not to do any of it because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the end. I always told myself I can always go back. I don't want to end up getting stuck with a degree and then having something. Let's say I went into special ed and ended up not wanting to do anything with special ed. But then I would be stuck because everyone would see that I had special ed on there, or if I had ESL on there, and I'm like, well, what if I don't want to do that anymore? You know what? And so I didn't want that to be the one thing that kind of sucked me down and only made me only do this area. So I did the easiest thing possible, and I went for elementary education, and I actually I was in an ESL classroom. So they placed me with ESL learners, mainly because I could speak Spanish, so I spoke Spanish to those kids all day long. And now I'm in special ed. So I still have an elementary education degree. It has not affected me getting hired or not.
That's really interesting. So my class this year, that's sort of a new class that we're putting together at my school, is essentially taking kids that are not on grade level and kids that are on grade level and putting them together.
Yeah.
Sort of similar to your idea in school. And I have no certification to be able to do this, but I think after being in a school for so long, it was just trusted that I'm going to do every single thing that I can, and in order to help these kids succeed. And part of that also is I do have a special ed teacher that will be working with me, so we're going to be co-teaching the class together, and that's really exciting because I feel like that's not what I came from. That was not ever my focus. My focus has always been the kids and looking for me wanting to make something where something didn't exist before. Right. And so that's what I'm thrilled about. And I think that goes into whether you just start out teaching now or you're trying to figure out what you want to go for, making it something that you're excited about now. Yes. Don't think about, so if you're not interested in special education, if you're not interested in ESL learning, don't take it just so you can get a job, because what you're going to end up doing is getting a job and teaching the thing you never wanted to teach. And then there goes that passion. There goes the excitement. And I think the trap can be that you think you're going to do it for like a couple of years, like, well, let me get in there and I'm doing this for a couple of years, and
you're
then I'll do what I really
because
want.
Then that's what they're going to give you.
Yeah, I so much believe that first year teachers should not play it safe and go all in on what they really, really want to do and the kind of teacher they always wanted to be, or the kind of teacher they always needed. Because if you wait, you end up getting into like a pattern of, well, I guess this is what I played it safe, and now you don't have the guts later on. You have to hit the ground running and do exactly what you want to do and be that excited no matter what anyone else is going to think or say about
you. That is such a great point. And I also want to point out too, and this is to everyone, out there who are about to be teachers, going to be teachers, you don't get to pick your grade. You get to pick the grade range.
Yes.
You don't get to pick the grade. So for so many people who leave comments, I want to be a 4th grade teacher, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. I am so glad that you want to be a kindergarten teacher or a 4th grade teacher, but you don't get to pick the grade that you're about to teach. So if my principal came to me and said, hey, you're moving to 6th grade, guess what? I don't have a choice. I'm moving to 6th grade or else I'm not going to have a job. You get what you get, and that's really about it. So you have to pick a range and then kind of go from there, and that's what you're stuck with. You can, cross your fingers and hope that you can get that job, or maybe look for that job later on in the future once you have something, but you don't get to choose your grade.
Yeah, and there is more flexibility down the road, but so when I moved to Philly, I'd always taught 9th grade. I love 9th grade. I think it's sort of, in my eyes, that idea of a pound of, or an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And so if I had kids that were about to graduate and weren't ready for college, I felt kind of helpless dealing with that. Yeah. But in 9th grade, I had 4 years to work with you. And so I was thrilled about that. I got the job in Philly. 2 weeks before school starts, I get a phone call that I'm also going to be teaching 2 senior level classes. And I was like, you've got to, I don't know anything about dealing with seniors. It was completely terrifying, but they had every right to do that because they had hired me. What was I going to do? Say, you can keep that job, then I'll just go somewhere else.
No, you get what you get.
August,
Exactly. You do what they tell you to do, pretty much. I guess now we've talked about all the school stuff. I think I want to give some tips to our viewers just about school and what can you be doing, while you're going through this process of education. What are some of the things that you kind of you've gotten into teaching and you kind of kicked yourself because you were like, I should have done this when I was in school. What are some things that you would highly suggest to some of your viewers?
I referenced this earlier, but I think it's so important, I'll say it again. I would get into as many different types of classrooms and as many different types of schools as I can before I go into my own. I think there's just so much that you can only learn by sitting in the back of someone's classroom, or maybe finding someone that's kind enough to let you hand papers out to kids or grade simple stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's just a multiple choice part of a test, or something where you're getting to engage with the students a little bit and start finding that sense of how do you engage with kids? Because a lot of what you don't get to do until you're in the classroom is find your own voice. How are you going to connect with kids? What kind of teacher are you going to be? What are your strong points? What is it about you that does not work with kids? And school doesn't give you that opportunity. So I'd say you have to make that part of your education up for yourself.
Yeah. My big thing would be to make sure you're going ahead and starting to collect stuff. I think buying books was the biggest deal for me when I was in school. I would go through and go to bookstores and start collecting books. A professor would say this book, I would go out immediately and I would go purchase it. Because at that time, I was working 2 jobs. I could totally go and afford to be able to do that, So I would go out and buy books. And then I also had one professor, which I totally loved. And this professor gave us scholastic orders. She gave out scholastic orders to us. So we would all get to order books from her, and then the books that she would get for free, she would raffle our names.
That's awesome.
So she would put all of our names in there, and she would just call out names, and we would just get to go and pick out all the free stuff that she had gotten from her scholastic order, because she didn't need it.
Yeah.
But she wanted us to be able to start collecting things and getting things so that, because picture books, chapter books, you can use it for anything, from when you get kids, you never know what grade you're going to teach. It's okay to have something that it's going to be a really great book, a really great resource to be able to come back to. So I would go ahead and start collecting things as I went along.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, one of the professors I had in college had us do an idea binder, and we had to break it up into all these different sections, like classroom behavior or pre-classes or homework. And so as we found things, this is like pre-Pinterest days, but essentially it's old school Pinterest, and you're like
scrapbooking.
You're just finding all these ideas, and then you would just put them in there, and then they were organized. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really great way to like categorize all this stuff you're finding, because you might know what kind of teacher you want to be, but you don't know what the kind of kids that you're going to get are, or what they're going to need. So you can't just, before you're in the classroom, it's real easy, I think, to like discard things or say, oh, I would never need something like that, but you really don't know. And
so like when you're there and you're in school and you're going through all of these experiences, just know that, when you're in university, you're not going to learn everything that you need to know. Okay, like I would stick to maybe some of the key terms that you really find like are important. Like they're going to talk about scaffolding, they're going to talk about differentiated learning, and they're going to talk about all the different types of learning. You're not going to remember it. I honestly do not remember it. It took me years of being in school to actually be able to remember what schema was. What was the difference between phonics and phonological awareness? Like that kind of stuff, I wasn't very comfortable with it when I left college. And then when I started teaching, I got better and I got better and better because I was doing it. I was actually physically like out there teaching it and doing it. So I needed to get to know those things. So don't feel frustrated that you don't know everything. And at the same time, like start digging into social media. Like I learned so much from bloggers and people on Pinterest and people on Instagram. That was the main thing, to the point where like, and I've said this on my channel too, but I love the first grade parade. Do you know who that is? No. I mean, she's a little young for your age. Like she teaches.
First of all, I love the name.
First grade.
Yeah,
fantastic. I know. She's so cute. I love her. Her name was Kara Carroll. And I mean, like, what perfect name, Kara Carroll. Like
that's a real name.
It's a cool name, right? But I started following her while I was in school. And I loved her so much. Like I got so many wonderful ideas from her. I wanted to implement all of those ideas, and I tried to do it too. And it was great, and it worked out. And she helped me a lot when I first started teaching. But then I slowly had to start learning that, okay, I can't be a Kara Carroll. I need to be a Bridget Svackman. So that was kind of the other point too, and while you're there and you're in school, don't compare yourself to every other teacher, because it's going to take a few years for you to be able to grow who you are as a teacher and the way that you teach and your methods and the how you like things. So don't try to compare yourself to everyone too, because you're not going to be them immediately, and never. I mean, it's just hard.
I think that's important to think of in terms of who you want to be because they're great, and who you don't want to be because you don't think that they have value, because you don't always know like what people's stories were. Or one of the things I see in teaching in Philadelphia is people will come into the city and they think, I have to go teach at this school because obviously no one cares about these children because their test scores are so low, or because look at their neighborhood. They start thinking they know something about the students and knowing something about the teachers, and they don't. And I come off, sometimes new teachers are put off by me because I do get along with the students so well. They'll question that and say like, well, you can't be that close to, like, I'll never do that because you can't be that close with students. And I think, no, this is my reality. This is how I survive year after year. This is why I'm thriving, because I create these relationships with students. And so I would say, like, be open to all of that stuff, and don't be too attached to the kind of person that you think you want to be, because you don't know who you need to be yet for the students.
Right, absolutely. So let's go into the big moment of school. That big where you are finally in a classroom with another teacher. So your student teaching experience, or some people call them internships, or what would you call it?
I did student teaching.
Yeah, student teaching. That's what we call it.
Practicums.
Practicums can also be at. So your student teaching experience. Let's talk about this, because I feel like I have so many things that I want to tell student teachers. I love y'all, and I am so grateful for every single one of you. But I want to help so much that I just want to tell them so many things that I feel like is really important for them to be able to do. What are some of your, I guess, big tips for those who are out there in their student teaching experience?
More than anything, I get a lot of students that come through different universities that are near my school, and they'll spend like a day of the week for like 3 months in my classroom. They just kind of sit in the back and they observe, and they can enter into stuff. Sometimes I'll have them grade or be a part of a lesson or be a part of a small group activity. But more than anything is start getting to know the students right away. I think there's so much value in just asking kids, like, what movies do you like? What TV shows do you like? What sports are you into? Where do you live? How long does it take you to get to school? Because that will inform the way that you're going to teach and the way you're going to interact with students as well. I learned so much stuff just because my students are into it, because I want to turn it into a lesson. And I've talked about this on my channel before. There is this really bad show. It's a bad show. I don't care if you like it. But Love and Hip Hop is like one of the worst shows I've ever seen.
I've never seen it.
And it's like The Real World, but 100 times worse. It's like drama, right?
Okay,
So
yeah,
I watch it,
drama.
and I used to watch Jersey Shore. You remember this one?
Yeah.
So I used to watch that because all of my kids were watching it. I didn't want to watch it. And I remember the first time I was watching it, my wife came home and she was like, "What in the world are you watching in here?" And I was like, "Look, I'm studying for school. This is for the kids.
I have to know this stuff."
And I wasn't trying to be cool, but what I was trying to do was learn things about the kids so I could meet them where they were, so I could bring them up to where I wanted them to be. And that was my intro. So I think learning your kids and learning what they're into there's a lot there.
And I think that helps to, I feel like as a student teacher, when you come in, you're that other person, and the kids don't really want to come up to you. They will always want to go to their original teacher. So for you to go out there and to really get to know them and, learn as much about them, and that tells them, oh, I can go up to that person. That's going to get them to open up to you a little bit more as a student teacher too. So that's really important, because it not only it's a two-way street, you know, they're going to be more apt to want to come to you a little bit more, because they're going to know that you care about them. And kids know. Kids know when you care, and kids know when you don't care. Like, they really do. So that's a really important thing too. I think my thing is just the level of professionalism that I am all about. Like, whenever I see it with student teachers, just looking at the way that you dress, looking at the times that you're coming in, because there are some people that will come in and they're like the last ones to come in, the first ones to leave. And that to me is like, okay, I want to see initiative. I want to see, like, when I was a student teacher, and not to say that I was the most amazing student teacher ever, but I mean, I may have been.
It's possible.
But like, I was there all the time. I was there waiting at the door for my cooperating teacher. I'm like, "Good morning, I brought you coffee." Like, I tried so hard, to the point where you were like, you watch those really goofy movies and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed for this person because they were trying really, really hard."
Yeah.
That was me. I was that person that tried too hard, but my cooperating teacher said, "You know what? I felt like you cared. I felt like you wanted to be here and you wanted to do everything that you possibly could." And I jumped right on in. I remember the first day that I was there, she was like, "You want to teach a small group?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." I jumped on in and I did it. And I listened to feedback. And I think that was another thing too.
Huge.
I tried not to make excuses. Oh, but, well, I guess this wasn't really doing it for me, and this. No, you need to change this. This here has to do something and change. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, whenever you start to give them feedback, they start to say, well, they get very defensive, and I don't know about that. Well, this was in the way, and then this kid was acting this way, and I had to deal with Johnny over there who was throwing pencils at little Susie, and they're always making excuses for everything, and you need to take in what it is that person is saying and immediately try to fix it.
Yep.
And if you don't know how to fix it, ask. There's no harm in asking and say, well, how should I do it? Because I don't really know. Because you don't know at that point. You need to try everything and experience everything, and that's that time for you to be able to really learn from another person. And I always feel so bad. Like I had an amazing cooperating teacher, and I always felt so bad for some people whose cooperating teacher would never let them do anything.
Yeah.
That's like the worst.
Because that's what you're waiting for, right?
I know. You're like, I just want to jump in and do it.
You've like been in basic training your whole life. You're ready to like get out there on the field and do something.
Yeah.
And you know, I really like that you brought that up, because I'm thinking of the courage that it takes to teach, right? I think Parker Palmer wrote a book called that, Courage to Teach. But this idea of like, it takes a lot of courage. You're making yourself vulnerable. There's 30 people sitting in seats that are all looking at what you wore. They're watching every single thing that you do. What time do you come in? When do you leave? How much more time are you willing to give? Are you patient? Are you kind? And you have to reflect all the ideals that you want your students to have as the teacher. So if you want them to work hard, you have to work twice as hard as them.
Yeah.
If I want my kids to be vulnerable with me or come to me and talk to me about stuff, I have to be willing to be more vulnerable than they are. If I want them to be calm in a stressful situation, I have to mirror that stuff too. Right. And kids will pick up on those sorts of things. And you know, my cooperating teacher was, for me, he was the best person that ever could have showed up for me in that situation. I actually did my practicum with him, which was like a 3 or 4 month stint during a semester, and I went in and I just observed his class. I think I had to teach like one time or something like that. But he called my school and he was like, I liked working with this gentleman so much, I'd love to have him come back and student teach. And I was like, man, that was awesome.
That is awesome.
He is got to be one of the hardest working teachers I've ever seen in my life. He didn't start teaching until he was 40. He had a whole other career. He retired early.
Wow.
And then he came back to teaching, and his room was magnificent. It was the first really, really great room I'd ever seen in my life. He bought all of his own stuff without thinking about it. He would teach kids to drive on the weekends. He was in charge of 100 different clubs. The students were a part of his classroom. So like, he didn't just do all the grading or the attendance or all of these things that he took on. He figured out ways to like teach kids through all of those jobs. And he welcomed me into that in that very same way. Like I think I watched his class for about a week, and then I was teaching 3 classes that were all of mine out of 5, right? So in high school, I was teaching 3 periods a day, and it was on. It was like, nope, you're going to take it from beginning to end, and that's what it is. And he would sit in the back of the room, write little notes to me, and we would have these real talks every day. And it's really important, like you brought up, to be open to all of that stuff. Yeah. I'm a generally sensitive person.
Yes.
I don't like, it's hard for me to accept feedback, good or bad. And that's something I just had to get over. Like that was something I had to work on in myself and open myself up, because it's so important. Yeah. You know nothing when you start.
Exactly.
And I don't mean that in a mean way. Like, you're just not experienced, and it's going to take people like working on you to help you get to a place where you are a great teacher. Absolutely.
But like, having that positive mindset is huge. You know, I would always see, and this was back when I was in elementary, because I've only had like one student teacher here in this school that I've been at this previous year. So when I was in kindergarten, we had lots of student teachers, always in the hallways, and they would always have this look of like stress on their face, or this look of like just irritated like on their face. Don't do that. Like, you have to fake it till you make it. Like literally, just put a smile on your face and keep that smile on your face the entire way through. That was one thing that I learned as a server. Like, when I was a waitress, like, I knew that I could never walk in not smiling.
What do you all want? You
know,
know?
I that was how I made my money. I had to smile and be nice and like invite. You know what I mean? That's how I made my money as a waitress. And so that I learned from that, and I was able to take it into student teaching, because even those days when I was stressed, I would literally go into the bathroom and I would cry. Like, I would cry my eyes out, and then I would have to walk out and I have to put new makeup on, and I would have to go right back into the classroom. But I had to fake it, and I had to put that smile on my face and say, you know what, I can do this. It's going to be okay. I'm going to go home and just cry later and watch some, like, I don't know, some gushy love sappy movie and eat a like gallon of ice cream. But be positive. Because I guarantee you, those teachers are all talking about you. Like, nothing is secret at schools, you know, like everybody knows everybody's business at a school.
Yeah,
so,
it's like a small family. Like,
yeah,
everyone knows everyone's dirt.
You all know each other's
Yeah.
dirt. So, like, everyone can see when you're stressed out and when you're not enjoying something, when you can't handle something. They notice it. And they pick up on it, and it starts to travel. And those principals rely so much on other teachers. I can't tell you how many times a principal came up to me, so what do you think about so-and-so? So what do you think about so-and-so? You know, trying to get feedback about, because we're the ones that are in the trenches. They're not in the trenches. They're having to go to all these meetings all over the place.
Yeah.
And they ask us on our opinions about these student teachers, and you know, we honestly give them what we see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So keeping that smile on your face and staying positive, I think, is a huge thing in student teaching, and it's really important because that's going to show that you're really enjoying it. Like, you're showing that you care, that you want to be there, that you're enjoying what it is that you're doing, and other people are going to pick up on that.
And I think that's just good practice for teaching in general too. The guy that I student taught with, Mr. Zakaria, Mr. Z, all the kids called him, he would say he was the best. He had a suit on every single day. Like, he was the real deal. He's told me that teaching is 90% acting, right? Maybe you have to teach something and it's not your favorite thing to teach. But if you tell the kids, all right, look, to be honest, this lesson kind of sucks, but we got to go through it anyway, they're going to be like, oh, all right. But if you tell them, like, you're pumped about it, they are more apt to be pumped. You're not going to win everyone, but they'll be more apt to be pumped. If you are really, really frustrated with a student, like, being able to control that anger or to put on a face of concern instead of a face of disappointment is really going to translate better to the students. And I think even strategic anger can be really well used also. I do this in class all the time where someone's doing something and I will yell at them, and so I'll like put them in their place and ask them to step into the hallway until I can speak with them, and the kids are all like, oh my gosh, like, Reynolds, like, it's been 8 months and we've never heard him yell. And then as soon as I come back in the classroom, I'm like, was that believable or what? Like, I just needed that to be believable. And the guys, every single time, they're like, you were really mad? I'm like, no, man, I'm not getting mad at that dude, but like, I needed that kind of shock to the system to be able to handle the situation. And I don't suggest you do that in student teaching. Do not yell at children in student teaching. It has to be, for me, it's always very, very calculated, and there's a lot that goes into me even being able to do that. But I think 90% of what you're doing is acting.
Absolutely.
And I think there have been times when I've come into school. I would not have done this during student teaching. There have been times when I've come into school where, like, one of my kids was in the emergency room the night before. Someone was sick. I had a really, really bad toothache, or I needed a root canal or something crazy like that. And I've told my students, look, I don't have it today. I am literally, like, I was up all night because my daughter got her hand stuck in an elevator door, or, which is really funny because I just told you that story a little while ago, or both kids were throwing up all night. And I come in and I can tell my students that, and they have totally, every single time, without fail, they have complete empathy for me.
Because you built that relationship.
Cool. Yep. And I can't fake it those days. But all the other times I have to be the positive example and be pumped about school, or no one else is going to be pumped. I can't. What am I going to do? Rely on students to be excited to come to high school? Like, it's never going to happen.
No. And I think, so for those of you who are, like, in school and you're about to get to the point where you're doing your student teaching, so the way it will work is typically, like, you're there for a semester, right?
Yep.
Is that what you were there for? So you're there for a semester, and you begin by just observing the class. So you're getting to know the kids, you're observing the teacher, kind of figuring out the way that the school works.
Yeah.
And
you observe other teachers. They'll send you to different classrooms and stuff.
And so from there, you start picking up little by little. So the cooperating teacher will then give you maybe 1 or 2 different lessons that you'll be able to do, and then they will slowly start to wean the class over to you. And I think for the most, like, I probably had my whole class for, I think at 3.5, maybe 4 weeks is what I had, like, them for the entire time, like the entire day. How long did you end up having yours?
Mine was almost the entire time that I was there.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good point, because it's going to depend on your cooperating teacher as to how much time you have, but let them know. Like if you are feeling comfortable and you're like, you want to do it, I would say, let them know, like, put a little bit more on me and I'd like to go with it. And if you're not feeling particularly comfortable, like make sure you voice that opinion as well.
Absolutely. And I think grade level also comes into that play too, because I feel like the kindergarten teacher would be a little bit more like slowly doing it, slowly. I'm going to scaffold you into this whole process. So it has a lot to do with your cooperating teacher, but then you will start to wean back and give it back, or in my case I just like handed it back to her that last
That's
day.
what
I was
did
like,
too.
Here you go.
It was like party and then you have your
exactly.
own class.
So it all depends with your cooperating teacher, but don't think that you're going to be like that entire time unless that person is very, very comfortable. But I think you said you knew him, Mr. Z, right, beforehand? So that's probably like also a really big deal as why you got to have the class so quickly.
But I also started in September, but he and I worked all summer on things. Like, so he was one of those teachers that didn't just not work in the summer. He was always like thinking about ideas or changing things up and then working on it all through the summer. And I got to be a part of that whole process. So that was some real education.
That's cool.
Coming from a teacher.
That is neat.
And I think it's important to note also, I think it can be really easy to kind of like write those kids off. Like you're never going to see them again. And I think you should absolutely go in and teach and be the person that you want to be and act like you're never going to see them again, because then you're not tied to like, you won't be afraid that you're like, oh my gosh, what if I see them next year and they tell everyone about this. So go in and teach like that, but connect with those kids like you're going to know them for the rest of their lives. I just got a call maybe 3 months ago. Someone found me on Instagram and they were like, hey, I was in Mr. Z's class when you taught at Winslow Township High School.
Sweet.
And we're all going out for drinks. Would you be interested in going with us? And I was like, heck yeah, man. So I went. I have not seen these kids in, I don't know, 12, 13 years, something like that. And we went in and it was like people with their wives, kids that like came in from California. Like there were about a dozen of us all sitting together. And it was so great. I mean, I love that anyway, but to be able to do that with kids that like, I knew nothing. I was a totally different teacher back then, but I still was able to create those bonds, and that is priceless to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
So it's just great. And I think creating those bonds, it just is later on in life, it's going to come back and be like, yeah, these were the people that were there in the beginning and they knew who I was, and you get to see your work paid off. Like they became, take a little bit of credit for who they've become.
Yeah.
I do, whether I deserve it or not sometimes, but.
Yeah, so soak it all in. Like just be a sponge when you're there and just try to soak everything in. I took lots of pictures. Like I would go to other classrooms and like ask, and I would take pictures.
None, and I wish so badly.
I took lots of pictures everywhere I went. And whenever teachers would offer me things, I would take it. I'm like, I don't know what grade I'm teaching, but I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
So I would never not say no to any of it. So enjoy the experience, really get it all in and just soak it up like a sponge and just learn from it. Learn as much as you can. I would keep like a little journal, and then I would write down some of the things that I did that I wasn't very, very proud of, and then figure out how is it that I could always fix it later on. Like, how am I going to approach this differently the next day? So think of it that way too.
I would say one more quick thing I would say is be mindful of your social media presence when you're student teaching. When I mentor new teachers, right? So sometimes I work for Teach for America in the summer and I mentor the people that are going to start teaching in the fall. One of the first things I do as I'm watching their classes, I look them up on Facebook or Instagram, and then I send them a message like, you should probably block this. That keg stand was probably epic, but I don't think you want it out there because I know that students are going on and looking people up as soon as they find out what their full name is. They can just look you up in an instant. And I've had that really backfire on some teachers before. They just get to see how goofy I am with my students, which is why mine's just out there. Anybody can look at it. But that's also a very planned thing on my part. Like, and if you could do that as well, like if you want to have like a planned social media presence, that might be something that you would talk to your cooperating teacher about. But be mindful of that. Like all that stuff you've ever put on the internet is now there. So just be mindful of that going forward. All right, this is the end of just part one with the lettered classroom Real Rap with the Reynolds collaboration. So what's going to happen now is we're going to continue this conversation, but it's going to happen on Bridget's channel, The Lettered Classroom, and you'll find that link in the description below, and you can just go over there and watch the rest of that. Here's what I would implore you to do before you go. Please leave questions and comments below. I love answering those, and that just keeps the dialogue going. It doesn't just become a conversation between the two of us, but it becomes a conversation that includes you. Perhaps you are a teacher now and you know someone that's in college or someone that's in high school or someone that's wanting to teach or someone that's student teaching. Go ahead and pass this along to them. I'd love to communicate with them, and they can go over and watch the other part on Bridget's channel as well. Thanks, guys.
Bye!
There it is, everybody. The conclusion of part 1 of my conversation with Bridget from The Lettered Classroom. In part 2 that you're gonna find on her channel, find the link to that in the description box below. You can head right over to her channel and check out the second part. We're gonna walk you through how to go through an interview and how to survive that first year on the job. Guys, if you like what I'm doing here, go ahead, hit the bell so you get notifications, hit the subscribe button, and hit that like, thumbs up thing, because that does something magical in the YouTube world, and I'm not really sure, but it definitely bolsters my self-esteem. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. I appreciate it. Peace.